Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. My name is Joy if you're new, and on this channel we help you move to New York City so you can live life on your terms. In this series, I am taking you guys through what it's like buying an apartment in New York City. I am 30 years old. I've been living in New York City for almost 3 years now. It's gonna be 3 years in April, and I am trying to buy my first apartment in New York City. It's going to be a co-op. So if you want to join the journey of the experience and documentation of trying to buy an apartment in New York, then definitely consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos. In this video, I want to share with you my experience so far, 5 things I wish I knew before I started my home buying experience. So if you're in the same boat, or if you're thinking in the future of buying an apartment or buying a house, you kind of like know what the gist is. I try to make this as generalized as possible, not just like specific to New York, so it could resonate with someone else. So let's get into the first one. The first one that I wish I knew was more about the pre-approval process when it comes to what I qualify for with my earnings. So if you guys have watched the vlogs before this, then you kind of are up to date, but I am basically in a 9-to-5 sales role. So if you're not familiar with how sales works, most salespeople either run 100% on commission, or they run off a base salary and then a commission. The base salary is what I get every 2 weeks, and then the commission can fluctuate if I'm having a good sales month or if I'm having a bad sales month. But with banks are very conservative. They don't want to risk giving out too much money if the person can't afford the house. Let's say they did really good in sales and then the rest of their quarters are really bad. Like, that's super risky. So that's something that I didn't really think about. I had been at my last job for almost like 5-6 years. So when I got pre-approved back in 2019, I actually got a really great offer from the bank. And then obviously 2020 happened and I wasn't working. I feel like most people weren't working, but I wasn't working. I was living my life and not collecting a coin, besides some stimulus checks. So, 2020, I didn't really have an income. And then at the end of 2020 is when I started working at my now full-time job in big tech. And I've only been there for, I think, 1 year and 6 months now. And so even though like my earnings for 2021 were something that would qualify me for a decent loan, they still don't want to risk giving me that loan. Most banks don't, unless they have 2 years of consecutive pay or 2 years of consecutive tax returns from said company. Now, that made me wonder, because a lot of people like to job hunt these days. Not job hunt. A lot of people like to bounce from job to job. So let's say I wanted to go to another company and they were offering me a higher pay. I have to consider if that's worth the risk, because if I do leave my job, if my company's watching, I'm not planning on leaving my job right now, but if I do leave my job, then I'm setting myself back, because if I have to get pre-qualified again, because you have to get pre-qualified every few months, then they're gonna be like, well, you've only been at this company for X amount of months. That's something to think about. Also, I obviously have YouTube and TikTok as a side hustle. It's not producing me enough money to live a life on its own, but it's something to think about, is that when you guys see content creators living their life and wondering like why they haven't bought a house, unless they have been in that career for 2 consecutive years where they're getting brand deals and making money, whatever's through courses or merch, 2 years, that's probably why they're not buying a hype house. Unless they have the cash for a hype house or an apartment, it's going to be really tough for you to get a bank loan. So that's something to keep in mind. Second thing that I wish I knew before I started my home buying search, which I kind of like remembered back in 2019 when I first tried this out, was closing costs. So closing costs are really high in New York City, especially if you are getting a condo. My real estate agent says closing costs for co-ops are anywhere from like 1 to 2% of the total value of the home. And then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 3 or 4% for a condo. So in one of the videos where I talk about co-op versus condo, I'll put it over here. I actually break down all the closing costs for getting a condo versus getting a co-op, and then if you want to rent, what the broker fee plus starting out fee would be just to move into an apartment. And the numbers are pretty crazy, so you definitely want to pause and watch that video if you haven't already. But closing costs can be anywhere from $10,000 all the way up to $30,000 depending if you're getting a co-op or a condo, and that's a lot of money. That's like money that you're not putting for your down payment. It's money that is not going to be investing. It's, to me, I guess you could say it is kind of you're investing in the equity of the home, but to me, it's money that you're putting in that you're not going to get out. Oftentimes when you are buying a co-op, let's say you want to move out in 5 years, you have to stay there for 2 years usually. But let's say I leave in 5 years, you have to pay a flip tax to the co-op. So basically what that is it's basically like a moving out fee. So there's a lot of rules and regulations with living in New York City and buying and investing in property in New York City. But the great thing is, like, real estate in New York City is always going to be high. Like, people always want to live here, besides in the Panini. So that's something to think about. Is if you think you've already saved enough money for your home, like you're like, I want to do 20% down on my down payment, don't forget that you have closing costs. Closing costs are going to be attorney fees, like property tax fees, moving fees, application fees, all these random taxes that our politicians somewhat created. I'm not going to get down that rabbit hole. Okay, third thing I wish I knew before I started my home buying experience was investing in buying a property earlier. Obviously, that's a privilege to do if you can. I would say when I first moved to New York, I did want to buy a co-op, but I didn't know that most New York City apartments that you're buying, there is an HOA fee. So back in 2019, I would say when the economy was way better and prices were actually higher, in my opinion, I wanted to buy a co-op, and I thought all I had to do was just pay like my principal payment, which is basically what your mortgage payment is. I was naive and didn't know that there was HOA fees that can sometimes be the cost of what your mortgage payment is, depending on what co-op or condo you're in. So, I didn't invest earlier. But the thing that I've come to realize as I've been like educating myself more with real estate, like I bought this book. It's about wholesale. It's not about what I'm trying to do. But I'm educating myself, and they say that if you plan on being in a city for more than 5 years, you should definitely invest, because there's going to be enough equity in the 5 years that you've owned that property, even if you sell it after 5 years. And I've been here now, for 3 years. And a quick update, you guys, I did renew my lease with my landlord, but I was able to do a month-to-month agreement with my landlord, and I wanted to do that in case I did find the property that I wanted to buy. Closing takes about 60 to 90 days depending on the co-op. Then I can move out and not have to stay here for 12 months. But I plan on being in New York for the long term. So when you think about it, like, let's say you're spending $2,000 for rent, then you're basically spending $24,000 a year to a landlord, and you're never getting that money back for equity that you could have put down into an apartment. But obviously, like, that means that you need 20% down for a co-op, or you need to have money to be able to afford the closing costs of a condo. So there is kind of like a starting fee for all of that, but I do wish that I invested earlier, because I feel like it's kind of a waste, in my opinion, at this point. That's number 3. Oh, it's 11/11, make a wish, you guys. I hope I get the apartment that I want. Lipstick. Number 4, this fourth thing that I wish I knew before buying an apartment or trying to buy an apartment in New York City was the value of your buyer's agent. So my parents are in real estate in terms of investors. That's how they have a stream of income, is through their rentals. And their strategy was that they just bought directly from the listing agent. There are perks to this, obviously, because then you don't have to pay the buyer agent for the commission, is what my parents parents were saying. And also my mom has done years, not investing, but researching the real estate market in the Bay Area. So she kind of like knows what she's doing. So I tried to do that out. I mean, I tested out a couple agents and I thought I could also do the majority of the legwork myself, like going on popular real estate websites and just calling the listing agent myself, researching their name, researching the listing and just calling it. And I found it stressed me out a lot. I felt like I was doing a lot of the legwork. There was also a lot of things that I just personally didn't know when it came to New York City real estate that my parents didn't know. Like my parents didn't know that you have to get an attorney to do the entire process in New York. There's attorney fees that you need to do. Like basically the attorney looks into the co-op, because a co-op technically isn't considered real estate. It's considered a company. You're buying shares of the co-op when you move into a building unit in the co-op. And so what the attorney does is it looks at basically the health of the co-op to make sure that the financials are good, that they don't owe a lot of money, that no one's trying to sue the co-op, all that sort of thing. So I was totally new on that. I also didn't know a lot of things like, oh, like this is a land lease, or I didn't know that there's certain financial restrictions to certain homes, or that certain homes are cash only. There's only so much that you can see from popular real estate websites, but real estate agents have a lot more knowledge. The real estate agent that I ended up hiring brings a lot of value. I'm actually going to do an updated video about things that you should look out for when you're interviewing for a real estate agent to work with. But I really like my real estate agent, one, because to give you guys some prelude, she is very involved in the neighborhood that I want to buy in. And I feel like that's really important because of the connections that she has with the seller agent, and also just knowing like what's going to come up on the market before it does, and then also the health of the co-op. So let's say a co-op owes a lot of money, or maybe their financials aren't good, or a lot of other things, or someone's about to sue them. You need to know that before you move into that co-op building, because you're going to be an investor there. So having my buyer's agent that I have right now has been so helpful. And if you want to see a more updated video about why I picked them, then definitely make sure you hit the notification bell so you are notified when that video does come out. I want to say like this April or maybe beginning of May. And then I'm going to end off with the last tip. The last tip is that I wish I knew how important inventory is. Like, I know because I work in big tech for real estate that we have low inventory, but I didn't realize how bad the inventory actually was. Like, there's some things that have just been sitting on there for months that I feel like are overpriced, and there are just not a lot of options. I mean, in the beginning of my home buying search, I was really excited. I was going out to so many different showings, so many listings. If you guys follow me on Instagram, I put a lot of polls and show you guys like the behind the scenes of looking at the listing. So make sure you follow me on Instagram if you want the behind the scene content. And I feel like now I've kind of seen like everything I want to see. I know specifically what I want. I know where I want to be and what price point. I don't want to budge. Like, I'm that annoying client that it's like, no, if it doesn't fit all my non-negotiables, do not bother me with the information. And so that's the challenge right now, is like, I had such high hopes when I first started that this is something that I could get done maybe by the beginning of summer, midsummer, and I am kind of losing hope. Not losing hope, but the season finale of this series might be really interesting. I don't even know how it's gonna end because I cannot write that ending for you yet. So those are all my 5 things. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you guys want more of this series, or you like me in general, just make sure you subscribe. And if this video gets a ton of likes, then I'll do a part 2. Later, bye.